Hey, we're live.
We're
Monty
here.
Hump Day back in the house. Oh, look, we both got our coffees. you, you got your Northern Ireland tourist mug. I got my. I'm silently correcting your grammar.
Good. We need people to maintain the English language the way God intended.
The Kings, man, the Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that line in Inglorious Bastards when they're down
Oh yeah.
in the basement, and
It's like, well, if I'm gonna go out,
yeah, I forget how he says it. He says, "Well, if this is it, old boy." I think I'd
mind
rather
if I
go out
go out
speaking
speaking
to
to
kings.
kings? Yeah.
Fine. So good, man. So good. You know what we say then, Stiglitz? Oh my goodness. So,
That's a
dude,
good movie.
how was your week? You've been excited about all the developments out there. What's your life like
What developments?
in the world,
Have
dude?
there been developments? No.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, man.
for me, I mean, I'm
Ernesto.
still I'm in a bit of a holding pattern. I've got school starts for me not this next week, but the week after. So next week
Hmm.
is the meeting week. So just every day, put on a tie, go go sit down, do some professional development. I'm actually leading a session this time, doing a roundtable on AI.
Oh,
So,
that'll be cool.
well, I've kind of become on campus kind of Mr. AI, just sort of more willing to experiment with it, to use it in the classroom, and also try to understand it. Like a lot of people, to them, it just seems kind of magical.
Right.
And so, running it locally, doing a bunch of different stuff with it. So anyway, I'm leading a little roundtable discussion on how we're currently using it. So basically, it's for professors who might be interested in trying something, or how would they exclude it more effectively. So I mean,
Mm,
one way I think kind of the conversation has really been dominated by how do you catch people that are cheating with it.
right.
And I think the primary thing that you should be doing if you don't want people to use it is don't give assignments that can be easily completed by the AI. Like
How
if your
would you
assignment,
design? Yeah, how would you design an assignment that's hard to do with AI?
Hmm. So I don't know if we talked about this on a session at one point, but um, I did one. So I teach philosophy. One of the books that we read is Augustine's Confessions, which is kind of his philosophical autobiography. Fascinating book. It's kind of a little window into what the Roman Empire was like right at the very end.
Mm,
Because he was in Rome, he was in Milan, he was in North Africa, and like what the educational system was like and what he did. Anyway, well, at one point he joins this religion and then really sours on it over the course of many years. And eventually he leaves. And he details the process, like kind of there was this intellectual change that happened to him. There's this moral change where he felt like it was no longer really teaching him um, like how to take responsibility, but it was more about how to like give responsibility away to the universe kind of thing.
mm,
And so in this, like over the course of several chapters in there, he talks about how he leaves that religion. So one kind of assignment that you could give would be, how does Augustine wind up leaving his religion? They summarize his reasoning for doing so and evaluate if you agree with those reasons. Well, that's extremely easy to do for an AI.
yeah.
Summarize something that's already there, put some kind of plausible sounding evaluation. Well, I think it's very important that
Right.
when
Right. Right.
people are making religious choices, it's like whatever. Like you
Yeah.
could put the prompt in there and tell it, write it in paragraph form. Because sometimes it tries to give you bulleted lists. So it's like paragraph form, and then you could just turn that in, and that would complete the assignment. So, but I don't ask that kind of question because I think summaries are pretty boring. I already know what he said. Um, so what the prompt that I gave was, if you had to change your religion
Mm,
using Augustine as inspiration, right? So you don't have to reference him, just kind of using him as inspiration. how would you change your religion if you had to?
And then
Right?
explain your
And
reasoning.
explain your reasoning. And I'll get some emails sometimes like, I'm really dedicated to my religion. I really can't imagine what it'd be like changing it. It's like, well, how about this? If it was a friend of yours who was thinking about changing his religion, what advice would you give him? And then with that advice, again, hoping he would find your religion, of course, since you believe in it so strongly. And that way you don't have to write it as though you were changing a religion, which, might make you feel uncomfortable. And there's no reason. Like if that makes you feel icky, you don't have to write it that way. It's fine. You get all sorts of cool stuff. Like there was one, this last time I tried this, I had some students who like definitely had their next religion picked out. They were like, okay, well, I'm cool with the religion I have, but if I was going to change, it would totally be this one. Here's why they believe this and this. I think that's super cool. This reminds me of something my grandma said, and I always thought it was kind of true. And right, and you've got other people that say things like, well, maybe I would change from one branch of my religion to the other, and this is why. So it's like maybe, like if they were a Sunni Muslim, maybe they would think about becoming a Sufi or Shia. Like what would that be like, And they're all very personal, and it's very difficult to write something like that if you haven't experienced anything in your life. Now, the people that just put that into the AI, you get these results that are just so bland, so generic. They'll say things like, well, it's very important to consult with trusted family members about, it's like a trusted, like your mom, like would you like to explain what a trusted family member is and why you would trust them and what makes their opinion interesting or whatever. You get just kind of garbage. And so I'm not sitting here trying to catch them using AI because I don't care.
Yeah.
I just like, this answer is terrible. You make an F because the answer is garbage.
Yeah.
Next time, and a lot of times
yourself instead of a computer.
Well, I never do that. So one time I responded to one with, I said, oh, like this, you just didn't say anything. It was so bland. It was so bland. The computer system flagged it as being written by AI. It was so bland. It was like a robot wrote it. So I don't know why I would say that, but we definitely got to make it more make it more about you, right? Bring your own experiences into it.
Right.
Because I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying it was that bland.
It's like those acting classes when the professor's like, I need honesty. I need yeah. This isn't acting class. I need honesty. It's like, how can I be honest? I'm playing an abused whatever, or whatever the case.
You gotta believe it. Believe it.
Exactly. But I'm trying to be honest, but I'm lying. You have to make your lies honest. Got it.
Yeah. Say it like you believe it.
That's interesting, man. Yeah. So when we haven't gone down the rabbit hole of the world of academia and all the different things that I'd say the world of academia is had massive changes over the last decade for sure. But that's interesting that you've become Mr. AI. It makes me feel good in my heart, because I remember when we were kids, we would watch Star Trek, the original series, and you always had this huge affinity for Mr. Spock. You just thought he was great, and so now Mr. Spock has become the AI expert. I mean, it's just perfect,
Hopefully I'm a little more emotional than that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I had I saw two, a meme with two characters, as Spock and Data, and Spock was the least emotional human.
Right.
And then Data was
computer. Yeah.
Data is the most compassionate robot.
Right.
And I was like, I'm Data. I'm the most compassionate robot. That's all right. You can put that on my tombstone. That's okay.
Well, I was wondering if the inside joke at school wasn't, we're going to make Russell in charge of AI because he is AI,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We always knew there was something funny about it.
Yeah. Some little. I always thought, and we'll talk about, Walt was tuning in, and Walt was very, you remember Walter, he was very disappointed.
Oh, of course.
That we weren't live yesterday. He texted me. He's like, what happened?
Where are you?
I was ready to hear about simulation theory. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I think it's such a before we leave that topic, the whole there's this huge debate that I was having with my friend Sonia. She's a massive Trekkie about, was the original series better Star Trek than the Next Generation, or vice versa, or whatever, right? And I was firmly of the opinion that, the original series, Kirk, Spock. I mean, how do you get better than that, you know? And she was just like I was some apostate, you know. She's like, oh, I can't. We're not even friends anymore, you know. I can't deal with this, you know. But have you had a chance to watch all of the Next Generation and all the different?
I have. Yeah, so I've seen all of the original series, all of Next Generation, and all of Voyager, but I have not seen Deep Space Nine. I know some people that think like that is the true, you know, apotheosis of Star Trek, but and then I've seen the new movies, but they're not connected. I've seen the movies too. The
new movies
are the ones involving
so, yeah, they're not connected at all.
Right, exactly. So like those. Putting those aside, right? But yeah, I have not seen Deep Space Nine. I only got about halfway through Enterprise. I watched the first season of Strange New Worlds, but not past that.
Got it.
So anyway, what was your question about, like, whether original series or
Next Generation?
Next Gen.
Yeah,
they just seem really different to me. I think the original series, there's so much about that deals with the television structure at the time in the 60s. So like it's very episodic. There's very little carryover from one episode to the next. There's a little bit. They've managed to sneak in as much. I think at the time it was like a lot of carryover, but by today's standards, you don't have these multi-episode storytelling thing that you can do. Yeah, and then I think also a lot of the philosophical aspect of it, while very good, was rooted in a lot of stuff that was going on at the time. Like they wanted to make it very topical. So you've got stuff on racism, you've got stuff on some of the political issues going on in the 60s. You even got like an episode about the hippies, you know, like some concern about like what mental health is going to look like. You know, if you've got people who can fix your brain, like what would it be like to hand over control of your brain to somebody else who's doing it for your own good? Like how can you be sure about that? Like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And then when they touch on stuff that winds up being more general, I think it's almost by accident. So like if you go and look at one of my favorite episodes from the standpoint of something like this podcast is Day of the Dove. And in that one,
yep.
Yeah, it's very quotable. There's a lot of really cool stuff in it, but it's this idea of like we are made to be enemies by another force that profits off of us remaining at each other's throats. And that as long as that situation continues, both sides, we will always lose until we sort of renounce the thing that is making us enemies. And it's like it's one of those things that's like, you should watch this every couple of years to remind yourself, right? That's still true, right? That's a kind of, and maybe that's always been true, you know, like it's not something that just carries over from the 60s, but like you can rewind the clock. You know, the 1800s, it's like, yeah, it's still true. 1700s, still true.
Right.
So, but I think it's kind of accidental. For the Next Generation, I think that they looked back and were like, you know, those were some of the best episodes. You know, where we really got into some deep stuff and presented it in a cool way. And it's like, why don't we just do more of that? And so you have a lot of episodes that are very philosophical. They deal with like the nature of reality, with memory, with like what counts as right and wrong,
right?
How should we organize human society? Like it's, and so I feel like that was a really strong point. I think the weak part is there's a kind of magic with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that, you know, it's like lightning striking. just those actors. And it's the same thing like the X-Files. We were talking about this. Duchovny and Anderson are so good together. You can tell they like believe in this relationship that the two of them have.
Right.
And it's so good that like they could remake the X-Files, but you're going to miss out on just the lightning strike, however good the show is,
Yeah, good casting is hard to over. I mean, like I got duped by a fake headline today that said that they were going to remake Tombstone with Matthew McConaughey as Doc Holliday and who's the guy from The Walking Dead, the bad guy with the bat that has the nails in it. What's his name? Jeffrey something. He's got 3 names. Anyway, he was going to be Wyatt Earp.
Jeffrey Dean Stanton.
Yeah, that's it. And I was like, are they serious? This is ridiculous, And then as I started kind of going down the rabbit hole, it's like, oh, this is fake. I'm like, thank God, man. That's something that just should not be messed with. I mean, the chemistry between those actors to do that play, I mean, it's just so spot on, I think, I agree with you. I mean, even as they aged and when they went into the movies, it's just like the banter and the history. The shared storylines is what's so funny to me is in real life, when you like William Shatner, just iconic dude, like in his 90s going to space. I mean, living his best life, in the final decades of his life, whatever. And but the rest of the cast members outside of Kirkins, or Leonard Nimoy and what's his name, DeForest Kelley, very mixed bag of opinions about William Shatner, from like Uhura and Sulu, especially the George Takei, man. I mean, like they're constantly like snipe. Actually, Shatner never engages. Takei is always like sniping at him or whatever. And I remember reading something that somebody interviewed William Shatner. Was like, "Why? It seems like there's a little bit of animosity there. What do you think about that?" And he's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I do remember working with him a few times, but just very like, I mean, so you end up on a TV set with somebody, a few times over a couple of years, and all of a sudden they think that you're friends and I should care what they think. I don't, whatever.
Yeah. Takei did say, so just kind of interesting bad blood kind of thing. He said that he had a real hard time deciding if he was going to sign on for Star Trek 5, because it's like, well, obviously you want to keep signing up for these because that's your primary paycheck.
Meal ticket, right?
Yeah. But 5 was directed by Shatner. It's
right.
Like, I don't like this guy. He finally agreed to do it, and he said, it was fine. It was great. Like, we worked. It was work. It's a good time on set. Like, it was a really pleasant experience. So it was like,
because it seems to me
okay,
that the only one that had a problem was him. Like Shatner is kind of like, I mean, whatever. I mean, so you got your feelings hurt time or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have to like each other. It's okay.
Yeah. Any comments about the news of the week? I mean, we had a couple things go on here. We had we have the hurricane coming for us again, another one.
Florida.
Yeah, we got a ceasefire proposal. Israel Hamas ceasefire potentially. Right?
We'll see if they sign it. I really hope they find some kind of lasting solution there. Obviously, I don't know what it could be. I think that's that's kind of a tricky thing right now for I think Democrat politics more so than Republican. I think Republican politics are pretty much okay with like, let Israel do whatever they're going to do. Palestinians are a bunch of, they're horrible anyway. They're a bunch of terrorists, so whatever. And I think, I think generally within the GOP, that's the feel. From the Democrats, though, it seems like you have a pretty sharp divide about who the bad guy is and what should be done. And I think if we were going to give advice to Harris on this channel, it would be do not touch this topic. I think she waded into it just a little bit. She was a Palestinian. There's some protesters at one of her rallies, and they were heckling her like, free Palestine. And she was like, I'm talking. It was very like, shut up and sit down. Like if you, she said something like,
if you want Trump to win, you can go ahead and say that. Otherwise, I'm talking.
I'm talking.
Right.
So probably don't shut it down like that. I think the thing is maybe if you said something like, yes, I mean, we're all sort of, the loss of life is very tragic and we need to find a solution, but like, don't say anything past that,
That
because
sounds like something an AI would write.
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
I'm outing myself. Yeah. But
Yeah.
try to stay out of that, because I think, I mean, you're already starting to see this. Like today, there was a rally where was it New York? Harris Walls rally in New York that they had to shut it down because there was protesters got violent, and like of course the police response to that was pretty wild. Something like that. I think I saw something like that. But like I would expect to see some pretty nasty protests in Chicago for the convention over this issue. So, try to stay out of it. Like, I think if she takes a position on either side, there's going to be people that simply will not vote for you.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that if possible. I think my headphones just died.
Yeah. Well, you had a little pause in your sound, but I can still hear you. So I don't know if you can hear me, but can you hear me now? It's like Verizon. I'm in a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me? How's it? Can you hear me? Is this okay?
Yeah, I got you. Yep, I got you.
Okay. I'm on my speakerphone. I must not have put my headphones in their little cradle all the way. They were like 30%. So.
I find that I have this problem anytime I use non-Apple headphones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've got all kinds of cool headphones, but for some reason the battery could be fully charged, and like these are rated for 9 hours, which is obscene. These are the between noise canceling. 9 hours, and sometimes I'll get a good solid. I mean, but I took them on the road on a plane trip. I always bring a backup anytime because. And this time they were fully charged, and the one ear went out, in like 30 minutes, and the other one still was showing full. But they both showed 100% when I plugged them in. It was bizarre.
I've been consistently disappointed with all true wireless stereo earbuds.
That's because you haven't tried Apple's.
No, well, even the Apple ones, like the people I know that have Apple ones, I'm like, oh, this is great. So you bought it when it first came out. It's lasted you this long. And I'm like, no, I replace it every year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, these are a little $150 or however much, disposable earbuds. Like, I find it kind of silly. So anyway, I try, but
going back to that, not that we were talking about Harris, but you made me think of something, and that was, I was listening to who's the guy that does Dilbert, Scott Adams, is it? Or
yeah.
And that guy is just a genius in listening to how people communicate and things like that. Mm-hmm. Like, he called the Trump victory back in 2016 early,
based on communication stuff.
Correct.
And messaging.
Correct. And he was just talking about this cycle. He was like, man, he goes, they are just screwing the pooch basically. And he's like, and I don't know who Kamala has on her team, but she's pulled some genius moves. And the ones that he was showing, which I thought were really interesting because I hadn't really thought about it this way, but he pointed out 3 examples. He said, look, so one was the whole laugh thing that she has going on, right? The immediately when they swapped her out, the cackle, right? Yeah, cackle queen, whatever. And so like you had all these Republicans, all the news outlets going, oh, she's not a serious person. She's, laugh, cackler in chief, whatever, right? All this stuff. And within like a day, they had said, oh no, it's because this campaign is about joy, right? And
the joy campaign.
Which I laughed immediately. I mean, when I heard it, I mean, it was kind of like, dude, pick your slogan. I mean, they're all like tragic, like whether it's hope and change or this and that. I mean, like make America great again. They're all, in my opinion, garbage, right? But there are some that really sell, right? Hope and change really sold. Make America great again really sold. I mean, that really captured, right? Build the wall really sold. And this whole joy thing is totally, I mean, they have completely neutralized. Like you go to these campaign events and you got people smiling and laughing and dancing and you got, like the Tim Wolves character or whatever. I mean, whatever, forget about the positions, just the presentation of it is very, they're happy, nobody's angry. Nobody's like mean. Nobody's yelling. Nobody's like, oh my God, we got to save America. Like all the stuff that I was thinking the campaign would be about. We have to save democracy, this Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, like Morning Joe stuff where everybody's like mad and we got to do this is crazy. And these people are all, they've completely just, there's no existential threat anymore. You don't hear that language anymore. It's all like very much like, look, we already did that. That's old. This campaign's about, joy and bring America up. And look what they're pointing to all these late indicators instead of comparing this administration to the last administration. They're pointing to all these like late indicators of the last 6 months or whatever, saying, look, we've added more jobs, we've got inflation at the lowest point ever, and we're on the right track. And why would you want to change? It's all very much like that. And now every time she laughs and does one of these like, routines where you're just like, what you sent that video a little bit ago about the bloopers, and she's got some doozies of bloopers, but it's all very like lighthearted and whatever. And the press is totally helping her out, giving her a pass on all these interviews. So it's like, they completely neutralized that. So that was the first
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. I was going to react to that one.
Yeah, go ahead. And I'll give you the other
So I think that's not terribly surprising. Or even, I mean, to me, it seems a little obvious because the issue that any Harris campaign is going to have, especially Harris, maybe less so if they had picked someone else to run instead of Biden, but Harris has been there. I mean, she's been part of the administration. She's been in the Senate casting tie-breaking votes for a 50-50 Senate, right? So it isn't even like you can say, well, I had some different ideas from the president, but I was sidelined. It's like, no, we got you voting on stuff. Like we know like that if the situation in America is bad or if people are dissatisfied with it, it's really hard to distance yourself from that. So the only real chance that they have is to say, look, that thing where it says 25% of America says right track, lies. Everybody agrees that America's on the look how happy everybody is. People can afford groceries.
If they don't agree, it's because they're just not informed. That's what it is.
Yeah, and like this is everything is wonderful, right? Like this is the campaign of joy, and it's like, it's just first day I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's like, why hasn't this been done already? Like you're already there.
Why don't you do it now? You're in there.
Yeah. Does anybody think Biden's calling the shots? You can just do it. You can just do whatever, And it's like, no, we got to wait. We got to wait till I'm elected, and then I will do those things. And it's like, I mean, what else are you going to do though? Like if you have a record like this, you've got to paint it in the best light possible. And I think the smart thing that they've done, and again, probably obvious, but so remember last time I said every time Hillary got personal and went off script, it was good. Like her numbers went up. She was very good person to person. It was the big events, the teleprompter stuff that was bad. But for her, she personally was very good. Obama was good in both places. A beer with Obama, yes. Speech with Obama, yes. A picture of Obama next to just a bunch of text, yes. Right, but sometimes
out of Obama
totally doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Right. But you have to like find what your candidate's good at. Harris consistently, every time she's off script or speaking one-on-one, bad. So they figured like we've got to prevent anyone from seeing her. No interviews, right? Let's get as few debates as possible. Maybe one debate, maybe. Finally that was agreed to, but it's kind of there probably won't be any other ones. Even CNN was talking to the campaign like, would it kill you guys to like give an interview? Like, oh, we will next month. It's like, next month, what's she doing tomorrow?
What do you mean she's hiding? Look at all the rallies, look at all the people who've seen her. She's putting herself out there. And the guy's like, dude, I mean, a rally is not the same as that. Right. Yeah.
That's not the thing. But it's smart for them because they need America to see as little of her as possible in order to maximize her chances.
The real her, yeah.
The real her. But the thing is, here's why I think it's smart is that, like Biden, the Harris candidacy, and then if she becomes president, the Harris presidency is about the adults in the room making the choices. She'll probably ask for some stuff to be more one way than another. There'll probably be some differences between her administration and the Biden administration, but really it's about the smart people running things. And so it kind of doesn't matter what she's, I mean, it's like, no tax on tips. She could promise anything. And it doesn't matter because she's not going to be in charge just the same way Biden's not in charge. Like that's the whole point of continuing.
That's what I said for years about that whole build the wall stuff. I was like, dude, he's not going to build a wall. Mexico's not going to pay for that. Like that's
Mexico's not going to pay for it. So I think the Trump campaign though has come to the opposite conclusion. And I think maybe it's because in the same way that Biden folded so quickly as soon as the news media was like, what strange thing has Biden done today? When he picked up his fork, did he accidentally pick up the spoon instead and look confused? It's like, let's watch. And then it's like, after a couple of weeks of that, Biden's done. Trump's been dealing with that for last 8 years now, where it's like, oh, when he came down the escalator, he had his arms sort of strangely on Melania's back. Is she safe? Like that kind of stuff is just, all the time.
She's invisible, so who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the Trump campaign figures the more we can get him out there, the better. The more unscripted. There's a press conference going on right now. Like we're right in the middle of it. Maybe I'll watch it later. I don't know. He had that hour-long conversation with Elon Musk. Like it's just like let's get him out there because like we already have all the negative stuff is getting trumpeted all the time. But maybe you listen to him, it's like, yeah, okay, it's a little rambly.
He doesn't sound that bad, right?
He comes off on tangents, but he seems like a nice guy and, has America's interests at heart. Like, it's not so bad. Like, and maybe they can kind of move the needle that way. So it's interesting. Like, I think it shows a little bit more faith in the candidate. But for the Republicans, the candidate actually matters in this case.
I think it shows that you can't shut him up is what it really shows. I mean,
oh, really? They're trying to tell him don't do it.
I don't think that anybody gave him the advice that he should go on, a complete like rambler for 2 hours with Elon. I mean, of course you can say yes to Elon Musk, and of course you're going to go on the thing, and I don't really fault Elon Musk because I mean he's not a trained member of the press, and he's not, I mean he's thinking he's going to have a conversation like this. The difference between you and me, or let's say. Like Joe Rogan famously will not have him on his podcast. And he's like, they've been asking, can we come? He said it multiple times. Like, no, I don't want him on here. Like, I'm not. And it's not even because he doesn't want to endorse him. It's because he's like, dude, I'm here so we can learn things about other people. We invite people on the show and we have a conversation. They learn about me. I learn about them. Like his intention would not be that. I mean, he would just sit there and just talk about whatever he wanted to talk, we'd ramble, all over the place, and you'd be trying to excuse me. It's just, it's not a, I'm not here to give a platform to somebody to and it's his podcast. He can do whatever he wants, but it's
fine.
I did think
I thought Musk did a good job of setting expectations. Like at the very beginning, he said, I'm not a journalist. This is not an interview. This is a conversation. Yeah. It's really hard to tell what people are like from just watching the news. And so this way you just get to hear us talk and you see what they're like. And it's like, I mean, I thought it did that. I thought he was,
there was nothing. I mean, like if people go and listen to that, there's nothing objectionable. I mean, really, even if you disagreed with a lot of his policy prescriptions, I mean, he did go off the rails talking about migrant crime and all this stuff, which is, to me, that is one of the biggest. It just annoys me because it's so provably false, like do we have an immigration problem? Yes. Are the incoming migrants committing, is there a migrant crime wave? No. In fact, you can go and look at all the stats. Not only is overall crime down significantly from when he was in office, and he brought it down from where it was under Obama. Like there's a trend. I mean, the last like 10 years, crime's been kind of coming down, but like overall violent crime in the nation coming down, right? But at the same time, like when you look at migrant crime, you've got they track basically 3 types of crime in the stats that I was looking at. You have overall violent crime, and then you have violent crime by citizens, violent crime by legal immigrants, and then violent crime by illegal immigrants. And the crime by citizens is like twice as much as the crime by immigrants. And then the crime by illegal immigrants is like so small. And the reason, most analysts have looked at this and go, well, I mean, the reason is self-evident, because like if you're in here illegally, it's like if you're driving around with an open beer in your car, you're very likely to be going the speed limit. Like you're not going to be speeding around with an open beer because you're begging to get pulled over, and now you've got an open container, much bigger problem, right? So like same thing with, if you're here illegally, you don't want to get deported. You're not going to do anything to call attention to yourself. So it's not like but the way he went on and on for like, a long time in that interview talking about, Venezuela and all these places emptying their insane asylums and their prisons and shipping them all to America. That's not happening. And so that's where I'm kind of like, dude, this is not he's trying to sell a narrative that's just not grounded in facts.
Well, I think the narrative, so think of it as narrative only, right? So not talking about the truth and falsity of it.
Right.
Well, I'm just thinking it's just talking about as a narrative.
Okay. All right.
So as a narrative, you've got like some high profile cases, like a few people have been murdered by folks who came over illegally, and then there was like they ditched their hearing, or they were released, and all sort of stuff. And so then it's like, as a narrative, right? You're like, you can put up that person's picture and be like, the person that killed her wasn't even supposed to be here.
But that's the same thing. That's the same thing that we do with guns. We're like, oh, this person killed these people with a gun. We should just eliminate guns because guns are the problem. Like any conservative,
I'm not defending it.
Brain cells knocking together goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. But yet with this one, everybody's buying it. The media's parroting it.
But when you're talking about like the thing with the guns, I mean, like the number of people that are. The number of people
back in the day, for example, right? Like, I mean, this guy, was let loose from prison, and he served his jail time, and then is one of the unfortunate cases of recidivism. It's not like, but they made the case like, oh, I think it was Dukakis. Dukakis is all about like, setting prisoners free so they can rampage through, our villages and murdering white people. It's like.
But you talk about so you talk about like, well, anybody with 2 brain cells rubbed together. So this is one that I've
once they're presented with the facts. Once they're presented with the facts.
I know. But when I've talked to my students who are not terribly well informed, you usually have like 1 or 2 people that are like public policy majors kind of thing. But most people are doing whatever, right? They're majoring in whatever. And I asked them, what do you think the percentage of people murdered out of all gun murders murdered with a rifle? And they put the number way up, like 75%, 80%.
Like very small, isn't it?
It's tiny. It's like less than 1%. The number of people killed by any rifle at all, like much less like the AR platform or assault rifle, whatever.
Your argument would be if you think that gun control is the answer, then you should ban handguns, not rifle.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that if you take a look at what kind of bans are being promoted by the Democrat Party right now,
weapons,
rifles. Yeah. So if you look at it, you're like, well, gosh, anybody that's informed about this would know that this is ridiculous. But as a narrative, because you hold up the AR-15, it's a very scary looking weapon. There's like all these attachments and stuff and scopes, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a weapon of war. It's like it's the only reason to have this is for mass murder, and so there should be a law against it. Everyone loses their minds because it's a great narrative, right? If you take a revolver,
but don't you?
More people get killed by a revolver, but it's like, well, this is what police officers. It's like this is American,
But don't you find that objectionable?
Sure.
Like, as a thinking person, okay. So as a thinking person, I find the whole migrant crime thing objectionable.
Sure.
Objectionable.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that's why I preface it as a narrative,
Yeah.
Right.
As a narrative, it's great. It's just a lie.
Holding up the picture of the lady killed by an illegal immigrant is kind of the same as holding up, like, with the white gloves, the prosecutor holds up the AR-15. Everyone's like,
right.
Scary.
He's literally, he was on that show, in that conversation. Like, look, I can't remember all the countries. They're all in South America. Venezuela was definitely one, and all these countries, their crime is going down, and our crime is going through the roof.
They're sending the criminals,
and it's like
the fantastic narrative. Dude, it's political theater.
My buddy Tony from New York, he would always say, "Do you know why so many Italian kids are named Tony? That come from New York, Italian kids are named Tony." I was like, "No," and he goes, "Because back in the day when they were shipping out all the immigrants from Italy, they'd stuff them into a box and they put to New York on the side of the box.
You and what?
Tony.
Tony.
Tony. Like, hey, Tony.
Tony.
To America."
I was like, "So is your name Anthony?" "No, it's Tony."
Tony. It's Tony.
Tony.
Yeah, that's right.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and hey, the reason these jokes are funny is because maybe there's a kernel of truth in there. Maybe, maybe, just maybe.
Hey, I'll tell you though, my prediction, I don't see any need to revise that. I think probably what will happen, is that, the media is going to get tired of sort of overtly ignoring the fact that Harris is hidden from view. CNN, I think, being one of the first ones on the mainstream to be like, "Guys, come on, like you gotta give us something,
Give it ever."
And and I think you're gonna see more and more of that until there becomes a thing where and Forbes. So this is something I just linked to you earlier. Forbes, who has their YouTube channel, has I think 3.5 million subscribers to it. They aired on their official channel the entirety of the Trump supercut, the supercut of Harris's gaffes. Like the really famous ones, like the passage of time and like the cloud. Yeah, and there's a lot more, of course, but it's like Forbes right now is like, hey, we need something about Harris, and if her campaign isn't meeting that need, then they're like, Trump's got stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think when you start to see more and more of that, then they're going to have to present their candidate. And when they do, I think you'll start to see kind of this sort of, we have this little Harris exuberance right now, that a lot of that is like, oh yeah, because I think if you're part of the Harris exuberance group, you must believe, I think, or have maybe a tacit thesis in your mind that it was merely bad luck that sunk her in 2020. That she was actually a great candidate and fantastic, and she got out before the first primary because of just luck. But actually, like every time she was in a debate or performance, her numbers went down. Every time she gave an interview, her numbers went down. Yeah. And so like this is all through 2019. She would see these huge fundraising things and then no ground support.
Right.
Like once people saw her. And you must think to yourself like, well, this is just bad luck. Now is her moment. And so Gabbard's not there to torpedo her in a debate or call attention to the fact that she, prosecuted, like that she held people in prison longer than their sentence in order to provide free labor to the state, stuff like that. And you're like, oh, that's not really good. But like, well, Gabbard's not there, right? All we've got is Orange Man, and we're all gonna close ranks, to prevent Orange Man from taking over. So I just don't think that's very plausible. I think we'll see her numbers decline as soon as she becomes more visible, which she has to. I think if the campaign was only 3 weeks long or 4 weeks long, they could do this strategy. But I think there's another 80 days, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's just too long to have a hidden candidate. Mm-hmm. Like even we all complained at the time when Biden was running in 2020 that he was running from his basement and he would just give these little softball interviews with people from through Zoom or whatever. And we complained about it then, but it was like, well, Biden has a super long experience. We've seen all the stuff. He was Obama's vice president, one of the most popular presidents in history. And also COVID, like he's trying to protect people by not having these big events, you know? And it's like, okay, sure. That's fine. But there's nothing like that with Harris. Like, I don't think they can get away with that. So we'll see. I think a lot of that exuberance come down.
Stranger things have happened, man.
Still win.
If you had told me, you know, a year or two ago that you could literally skip every debate in your primary, like just I ain't debating you fools, you know, and literally use your courtroom appearances as campaign events, and you know, campaign from, you know, where Mar-a-Lago by calling into talk shows, like literally over your phone, and get, you know, 30 minutes or so on a morning show over the phone, you know. I would have just been like, dude, that's crazy. That's insane. I mean, you know, I have not seen him yet do like a retail political event, like, you know, like just the standard stuff, you know, going to the local diner, meeting people, shaking them by the hand and sitting down, having coffee with people. Like, he doesn't do this. It's all events, all stage, it's all production, you know, it's big stuff. It's that, you know, Scott Adams was talking about just some strategies that he could use to, you know, one of the things that he said that I thought was so interesting. And I was like, dude, this is really good, right? Like, I think, like, for example, JD Vance has, you know, gotten this characterization of like, you know, anti-woman and, you know, whatever, all this different stuff, right? The childless cat lady comment and all this stuff. But he's been very effective at, even when you disagree, like so many things I disagree with him on, you know, like his all these different positions. However, when he goes on a interview, he's able to, he's very good, man. He doesn't get pinned. He's like Pete Buttigieg is like that, is very like whatever gets given to him, he answers it in a way that then reframes it and hands it back to the person in such a concise manner, you know. And Trump doesn't have that gift, but he does have the ability, if he chooses to use it, of actually like interacting with people and explaining to them, you know, like Adams was like, what when you just got a bunch of like, literally you could film this, is like, hey, we're going to get some reasonable but firm opposition to you, right? Liberals that care about abortion rights and all these different things, right? And let's just we'll have a town hall like that. And he could do a Charlie Kirk thing where it's like, okay, come up here, ask your question, whatever. And we'll just go back and forth, you know, like, I mean, he could very easily say, not that I agree with this position, by the way, but like he was saying, well, look, you know, like, oh, you want to control women. You want to control what, you know, well, how do I want to control women? Like, in fact, I gave up the control. In fact, we went to court to make sure that I didn't have the control. We gave that control back to the states, you know, I mean, and really it's up to the women in those states. I mean, half the men out there already agree with, you know, letting women, you know, do whatever they choose to do. So it's up to the women of those states. And so if the women of that state decide that, hey, it should be illegal, well, I mean, who am I to say? I don't have any control over that. You know,
that's a state issue.
That's a state issue. And, you know, if they want to go crazy and say, hey, you know, do this and that, I mean, it's none of my business. And there are issue after issue after issue where he could make that kind of very reasonable case. Because I've heard some reasonable people articulate his policies way better than he does, you know?
Yeah.
And you could make a case for, and you should, somebody should be out there making a very strong case for like strong borders and all these other things without like lumping all these lies and falsehoods on top of it. You don't need all that. I mean, you don't have a border, you don't have a country. I mean, it's almost like, I can't remember who I heard saying it the other day, but they were like, it's really like people are hungry for like that dad voice. It's like, okay, kids, look, we're going to lock the door. Here's the reason we're going to lock the door is there are bad people out there that want our stuff, you know? And so we lock the doors in this house before we leave, right? Hey, we're going to turn the lights off. Why are we turning the lights off? Well, because nobody's home. Electricity costs money, and we don't need to be spending money when it's not necessary. So we're going to turn the lights off. Yeah, just, and it's, you know, and I remember our dad doing that, right? Like our dad was crazy. I mean, he still like will turn the water off in the shower while he's soaping himself. I never understood that. I'm like, no, I want the water running all the time.
Just keep the water going.
Yeah. He was like, son, you're wasting water. You don't know. You haven't been to countries where there's a lot of people that don't have water. And it's like, yeah, but I don't live in one of those countries and I want the water.
Yeah. Like I live in a city that receives so much rainfall. Like we don't know what to do with the water. Like we have too much water. I live in a literal swamp.
to recycle it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Like I'm helping.
Stacking up in that reservoir. We got to, yeah. The freshest water is the water that moves, and so I'm helping.
Yeah.
I'm helping move that.
There we go.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's do a shift here and talk about because I promised Walt, and we got 20 more minutes or so.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about simulation theory here. So I've been listening to some stuff. I've been looking up some things, and I think that my interest in this whole thing. Well, first of all, do you want to like explain the theory to people? Like what you've been teaching philosophy for a while. This theory's been around forever, right?
Long time. Yeah. So there's a couple different versions of it. There's like the very strong version of simulation theory, which is kind of like the Matrix, like that this reality is actually manufactured by something else, and that in the same way that you might like play a video game and there's NPCs in there and other players, that's the same level of reality as this. We're players in this thing. It's made elsewhere. And there's sort of like reality zero somewhere under there, but maybe the people who are running our simulation aren't even in that. Maybe they're also in a simulation. So we have like simulations inside simulations.
Inside simulations, yeah.
Yeah. So that's like hard simulation theory. And then you've got
we're in one of the few simulations that hasn't created its own simulation yet.
No, we have. Like in video games and stuff. And avatars and
but full simulations, right? Like we don't have a second life, a full functioning second life where
that's the thing is that like we're, for whatever reality is beneath us, like more real than us, we're NPCs to them.
Right.
So like we think and we're experiencing, and we are like, we're very advanced NPCs where our AI is really good here. And so our simulations that we make have NPCs, but they're just not as sophisticated. So they don't have awareness, they just kind of go through their subroutines. Right. So we're NPCs, right? In hard simulation therapy. Yeah. So the softer version of it is that reality is quite different from the way we experience it. And so we're creating a simulation for ourselves that pull in whatever data comes in off the senses and then constructs whatever our experience or world is. And so there's a lot of debate about like what that construction looks like, what elements are there, what are not. So like, for example, and this is the way I think is the easiest way to explain it to people, is one I use with my students. This is actually from John Locke back in the 1600s. But if you think about what color is, right? So you experience green, blue, and all that sort of stuff. But what is color really?
Light refractions.
Well, yes, but
bent light waves, really. Yeah.
Well, no, even if the light is all going in the same direction, what makes one color different from another?
The frequency.
Right. The distance between the peaks and the valleys
of that particular wave. Yeah.
Of that particular wave. So the difference between green and blue is actually distance.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
But you're experiencing it not as distance. You're not like,
oh, that's further away than this. Yeah. Right.
That's 45 nanometers and this one is 70, right? Like that's not how you're experiencing. You experience it as green or purple, right? So green and purple aren't part of the world. They're part of your mind. The world includes distance, right? And you can do the same thing, like what smell or taste, right? Is that molecule fits into the receptor in a particular way? That's shape, right? The world doesn't include smells where you're like, butter, I smell butter. It's like, no, that's a shape that fits into another shape. The world includes shapes, doesn't include smells, right? And we start going along this path. Well, you keep doing this after a while, and you actually reach the point where you're like not really sure that they're shapes either.
Right.
And by the time you get to like the late 1700s, a lot of people are pretty convinced that space and time are like color. They're interpretations that we maybe are forced to use because the way our mind works, but that they don't actually map onto reality. There is reality. There is something out there that we're experiencing, but the fact that we experience it as space or as time, like as three-dimensionality or duration, that is a facet of the mind, not a facet of reality. So the simulation happens in here, but there is a reality out there, and we are experiencing it. We're just experiencing it in this particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the hard simulation people, and you've got the soft simulation people. The soft simulation people, I think there's a really long history behind them, and I think very, very respectable to be a soft simulationist. Well, in fact, in a lot of ways, it's kind of common sense. Like, especially like when you explain color or smell, you're like, of course, I don't think those exist in the world. Those are,
Right.
facets of my mind
Perception.
interpreting my sense organs. But if you're saying, well, no, actually, so you're not experiencing reality at all. Right? There isn't a
there's a guy that I've been listening. There's a bunch of people talking about this right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with,
it's very trendy.
It's very trendy, yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with this whole idea of particle superposition, right? That the idea that the Schrodinger's cat thing, right?
Yeah.
Where, so, for those people it was actually interesting. So I was in Roanoke, Virginia this last weekend. I was hanging out with Dave and Neri, and I was talking about this idea. I was like, oh yeah, you should tune into the podcast. We're going to talk about this. And he's like, well, I don't understand. What do you even mean? And so I was literally like, okay, let me go like down to like the nubs here, right? And just kind of try to explain, like superposition, because he didn't even, it was like totally foreign to him, right? But like the whole idea of like, I was explaining to him Schrodinger's cat, right? It was like, so the thought experiment is you got this cat, it's in a box, and there's a basic, to oversimplify, there's a timer and some poison's released and the cat dies, right? Or not, okay? Because there's the trigger is this decaying radium or whatever, right? And so like you don't know whether the radium is actually decayed enough to trigger the bomb or not, right? You just don't know. And so if you open the box and check and the cat's alive, you're like, okay, cool, cat's still alive, right? But then later you open the box and the cat's dead. So logically, okay, the cat died somewhere between the time that I last checked the box and the time that I'm checking the box now. Like he could have died like 1 second before I opened the box, could have been a minute, could have been 5 minutes. Like, let's say it's been an hour, right? You don't know. Sometime in that hour, like CSI, sometime in the last hour, the victim died, right?
Right.
And I said that's common sense. We all understand that, right? So what Schrodinger was saying was that because of these particles can exist either as waves or particles, but you don't know which form they're going to take until they're observed. Like in fact, they're
in both forms.
They're in both states until they're observed. And they've done all these experiments. I was explaining to him the two slit experiment on YouTube. If you're watching this, and you haven't seen it, just go to YouTube and type in two slits light experiment, and you'll see hundreds of videos on this phenomenon. It's like, and it really is like when you first see it, it's mind blowing. The fact that these particles behave differently when they're being observed than when they're not being observed. How do they know? Like, that they're being observed, and how would the act of observing cause them to behave differently? Right. There is no, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no explanation that Loa was, when I was talking to Loa about it, she's like, well, so I guess when you observe them, you must be giving off a different energy. And I'm like, well, yeah, but no, they've even done it with camera. They got a camera in the room, and the camera, literally, like, camera's recording, the camera's not recording. They behave differently whether the camera's on or off. Like, it has nothing to do with a human. It has to do with them being observed. And there's no explanation for why that is. And so that's where a lot of this simulation idea comes from, is that just like in a VR headset, I might be in a castle, or on the mountain, and I can walk around on top of this castle or through this maze, or, hunting werewolves or whatever, right? With my gun, and here's the gun, and there's the werewolf, and boom, you're dead, right? But there is no gun, there is no werewolf, right? I'm just in my living room, right? And so there's one professor that I've been kind of listened to a couple of his talks. I shared with Donald Hoffman, and he's been kind of talking about this idea for the last like 10 years. And apparently they're doing all this research at CERN, like with the, colliding the particles and stuff to like really get to the core of, trying to figure out how all this stuff works. Right. And his whole theory is basically like grounded in evolutionary game theory. Right. And so the core of it is that, okay, so you got all these organisms, and these organisms are competing for resources, right? And to find mates and reproduce, right? All this competition is going on. And so the animals that have traits that increase their fitness, right, which is their survival and ability to reproduce, they are going to pass on their genes more often than animals without those traits or lacking some of those traits, right? And so the process of natural selection, as they're going through that, shapes perception, right? So you have like animals, for example, that are nocturnal hunters, and those animals literally can, they have like thermal vision, right? Like they can see things. Now they're not seeing reality; they're seeing their representation of reality. So the whole question was, well, would you evolve to see the world as it is, or would you evolve to see only the parts of the world that would help you, survive and replicate, right? And we know from that no, you actually, in fact, the less real what you're observing is, the more likely you are to survive and replicate. Like if the way that you're perceiving the world blocks out all the stuff that's extraneous to you and only gives you a representation of what you need, right? And he has the example of, let's say you're playing a video game, and he uses like VR. So you got your VR headset on and you're playing like Grand Theft Auto, right? And so you're driving your red Ferrari and the cops are chasing you and you got, whatever. And he's like, now, and let's say I'm competing against you, right? So, because that's what evolution is competition, right? So you're playing the game, I'm playing the game. And in your version of the game, you have a car, you have a steering wheel, right? It's a red Ferrari, whatever, right? Well, in reality, there is no red Ferrari. There is no steering wheel, right? In fact, what's actually happening is you are using an interface to adjust the voltages that are going through these circuits, right? And you're adjusting those voltages in a very specific way. And when you adjust them in certain ways, you get certain, feedback, positive feedback, which helps you win the game, right? Now, you have the avatar, you have the steering wheel in the Ferrari. I, on the other hand, have to actually manipulate these voltages by hand, right? And he's like, well, you're going to have an overwhelming advantage to winning the game because they have simplified the manipulation of these voltages into avatars that you can understand, that right? And it's just like a computer desktop. Like on this desktop, I have folders and I have files and videos and whatever. But actually, I don't have any of that. What I have is
a bunch of ones and zeros,
a bunch of circuits, and on those circuits is a bunch of ones and zeros. That's it. And so by adjusting those ones and zeros, I'm increasing the brightness of the screen, dimming the brightness of the screen, displaying this image, making this pixel flash red and this one flash green. And actually, they're not flashing red or green at all. They're emitting a frequency wave that I'm interpreting as red or green. And so it's actually not helpful for me at all to understand the reality. In fact, the less that I have to interact with it, reality, the better for me, right? In terms of actually utilizing the system. And so I think he would be firmly in the camp of your second,
because in that view, there is a reality that you're interacting with. There is something there, and that's something there. At least with evolution, if we're going to take that as our primary model, it is going to reward certain behaviors and other behaviors it's not. So, and if you think about all the different animals that went extinct because of a predator evolved that was a little faster than them, or whatever, and it's not like, well, in my reality, I'm fine. It's like, no, that doesn't matter. Evolution doesn't care. So there is a reality there that will punish you if you get the voltages wrong in this case. But what you're seeing is a highly edited, highly streamlined version of what's really there. Only the parts that are relevant to you. And how do we know that those are relevant to you? We've got billions of years of trial and error to know that these are the relevant parts for you.
Yeah. Right. Well, and it's interesting because this guy was on a podcast with Jordan Peterson, and it was interesting because Peterson this isn't really, I mean, he's a really smart guy, but this isn't really his area of expertise, right?
He's a clinical psychologist, yeah.
Right. And so he's like, right. So it's kind of like, we're looking at a black and white TV, but the actual reality is like, full Technicolor, 4K, whatever. And he's like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, there is no television, and what you think you're interacting with is so far from what's actually true. Like there is no actual representation of like this remote, for example. It's not a thing. And what's interesting is, he was talking about this theory of everything, that like Stephen Hawking was after for, his whole life, trying to that mm-hmm. unified theory. He's like, look, all of science is based on assumptions, like any scientific theory, like the theory of relativity, right? Okay, grant me two assumptions, right? That there is a reality, and that that reality would be better understood if whatever it is, right? Like, so you have to, every scientific theory out there starts with some kind of assumption, right? So assuming this, mm-hmm. so grant me one miracle, right? And then I'll give you the rest of this, right?
Right.
And he's like, so what is it, and that, I'm just speaking philosophically because I'm not a scientist, but like what he was saying was like, okay, so we've explored the depths of reality as far as can be measured, right? Like, so they have taken, and he was talking about like, so they have the mathematical structures that we have, all the mathematical systems and everything. They account for, you can go down to the atomic level, molecular level, atomic level, subatomic level, particle level, right? And you go to quarks, strings, all these different things, right? But like when you get down to, and I forget the number that he said, but basically it's like, I think it's 10 to the negative 33 centimeters. When you get down to that level, that below that level, so theoretically you could continue to divide that, but like below that level, all the mathematical equations and theories go out the window, because reality below that level does not correspond to, like, you feed it, there's Tony. Ant-Man never killed a baby bear. I don't know what that means, Tony, but I love you, buddy.
It'd be like trying to divide by zero. It's like the normal dividing process doesn't help you.
Correct. And he's like, so we've taken it down here, and so now they're exploring, okay, what is outside of what we call space-time. So like, he's like, I'm going to say this badly, but he said basically like, we've been used to thinking of ourselves as these tiny objects in this vast universe that we call space-time, right? And it takes this long to get from here to there, and the speed of light is the fastest you can go, and all these different things. He goes, well, all of those, and this is his theory, all of those are basically game limiters. That's the limits of the simulation that we are living in. That's it. Like that's the megahertz limit of the processor, right? Like you can't go faster than that. But we're not, the emerging theory is that instead of we being these tiny objects in this vast space-time, that actually space-time is not the foundational thing. And they apparently, this is now, the way he was talking was like, this is the consensus in the scientific community, these people that study physics, is that space-time is not the foundational reality, right? What you were talking about, like below that is the real. He's like, mm-hmm. There is no external real, that instead consciousness is the fundamental, right? So instead of reality being the fundamental and consciousness is something that exists inside these things that we call people, instead consciousness is the fundamental, and consciousness has created space-time that we are experiencing as this little version of consciousness. But in fact, so I'm saying that super badly. Somebody can come on here later and correct me, but
so this
that's what he's positing. He has no scientific basis for saying any of that, but
this is an outgrowth, I think, of the Copenhagen model for quantum physics, which does put the observer as the foundational piece, right? So just kind of for everybody tuning in, where we've talked about this kind of thing, but normally when scientists think about consciousness, we think about it as running on, or like a emergent feature of the brain. So lots of neurons connected in very complicated ways, and those neurons are made up of all the chemicals and molecules and everything else. And there's a discussion about maybe they're using a kind of quantum tunneling in order to get some of these fast. But whatever it is, you have sort of base reality, and that's layered up, right? So you've got,
and at the peak of evolution is human consciousness.
Right. So you got physics at the bottom, and then you've got chemistry, then biology. Then psychology, right, is built up off of this biological structure as this, like I said, an emergent feature. It gets complicated enough, and then consciousness is something that can happen.
Yeah. And it goes back to that book we were reading too.
Right. Yeah. But I think most people that are kind of observing human beings think of it this way, right? I mean, we've all seen sort of brain injuries, whether traumatic or from disease, and we say brain seems to go, consciousness seems to go with it. So I think a lot of good correlation here, as far as that's what consciousness is. It's a function of the brain working the right way. But this model says, well, look, the things that we're seeing or observing at the subatomic level that require an observer cannot be explained away. And so the thing is without the observer, I mean, the light's got to travel from point A to point B, right? And you're going to need an observer for that to have happened. And so that means the observer needs to predate any physical reality.
Correct.
Right.
Because I look up to see that star, but yet that light took 400,000 years to get here. So
400,000 or 400 million.
Right.
Yeah. So in that case, it's kind of like, well, the fundamental thing now is not going to be particles. The fundamental thing is going to be the observer. And then we're going to call the observer consciousness. We're just going to kind of give it this label. That's what the observer is. You can get a little bit of this also, and I hate to keep bringing up, like in the 1700s, 18th century.
That's why we're having this conversation, for you to bring that up.
Yeah, well, but this is one of the things that's bandied about a bit. It's like, well, what if the only thing that's real is ideas, and that's what we are? We're ideas, and the coordination between the idea of me and the idea of you, the idea of our listeners, and the idea of the dog, and the idea of the sun, and everything else, is that all of that is being coordinated in like a super mind, which we'll just call God, right? Mm-hmm. But the super mind, we're all ideas in the super mind, but that's what. So if in my idea I slap you across the face, and your idea you feel the pain. Because otherwise, if there wasn't the supermind doing it, we would just have all these observers creating their own realities, and there's no actual interaction. Which, that is another route that you could take. Like if you wanted to go like not just hard simulation, but hardcore simulation,
right?
And that is
all of this is for me. I think that's a very narcissistic view of not that whatever. It's a possibility, but I think one of the things that
you want to avoid that. Right. If your philosophy comes out that like that anything that I do to you is only my own mental perception of it, then like, well, there goes morality, there goes any kind of compassion. And as the most compassionate robot, I cannot allow this. So.
Right. Yeah. No reason to consider anybody else, because there is nobody else. Yeah.
There is nobody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so he it was interesting listening to him, because he and out of all the people I've heard explain this, he was probably the most interesting to me, because he's a neuroscientist, this Hoffman guy. And he was talking about, look, like he goes, in my theory, like if I really like, he goes, and I've eaten this dog food. He goes, I came to this conclusion, 10, 15 years ago, and it was earth shaking. And he goes, I literally have to, you have to wake up every day and just kind of remind yourself, right? Like, because it's a very uncomfortable thing. He goes, but he goes, I'm a neuroscientist. I study neurons, brain function, et cetera. A lot of this work has risen out of that study. And he's like, but, at the core of my theory, there are no neurons. There are no neurons. Like the neurons are a representation in space-time that has been created, or I have created for myself, however you want to look at that, to better understand, these things. So but I think we need more money to invest in that, because I mean, this physical reality is what we have to work with, and it's yielding all these results and everything. So I'm not arguing against. He's like, in fact, if anything, I'm arguing for more money, more funding to understand this. But he's one of the people on one of the interviews I was watching, they were like, well, so this is interesting. So one of the foundational things about like any conscious being, well, we only have humans to reference, right, as conscious beings, but
I think many animals are conscious, but it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of I'm talking about sentient beings, self-aware, right? So a self-aware is to know yourself, right? And what Socrates know thyself or whatever, right? Is that so?
It's the Oracle of Delphi. It's inscribed, right? It's two things:
know yourself,
know yourself, and nothing in excess.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So he was like, imagine. So the conversation was, imagine if like just adopt the theory, try it on for a minute, right? Let's pretend, right? So if consciousness as a whole is the foundation of reality, right? And consciousness, this giant consciousness, right? Which, like you said, we could call it God, right? I thought this was very interesting, because one of the people that was interviewing him said, well, doesn't this allow faith and religion to come back into science? And he goes, absolutely. He goes, in fact, that's one of the interesting things about this theory and how it's gained prominence over the last decade, is because for years science has been, look, we don't need any of that stuff. We're just going to focus on what the observable reality, because that's reality. And what we now have realized is that, like, no, I mean, we know that reality is not, at least we know that the reality as we know it, space-time, is not foundational. We know that now, because there are these structures outside of space-time that have been measured and whatever else. So we know that. Now, what else outside, that's up for grabs, right? But we know that space-time as we understand it is not foundational. 90 some odd % of space-time is made up of dark matter, which we don't even know what that is, right? So like, and so, but so take on this theory, right? So the theory is you have consciousness, right, that creates space-time so that it then puts a version of itself, a slice of itself, into space-time and forgets what it is, right? And emerges as a baby to live its life, right? And only towards the latter part of its life, right, does it begin to be aware of, we're all connected. This is all that, and there that affinity that you get. And so because why? You're having a billion individual experiences of yourself, right, to learn and know yourself, right? And this is the exercise that the consciousness is going through, right, to better know itself. And it was so whack when I was listening to it, just so bizarre. But at the same time, it was almost like, just for me personally, like considering that idea, it was almost like such a, like as a Christian, thinking about, God and the nature of God and you and your relationship to God, and how, all the teachings that we grew up with, right? Like that God is constantly pulling you back to himself, to trying to, wanting to, desirous of reconnecting with his creation, and that you and the Father could be one, and all these different things, right? That Christ said, and to all the different passages, especially like in the Old Testament and New Testament, of God like drawing his people to himself, right? And if you just let go of your attachment to this reality, right, whatever it is, right, that's where the true like joy and rediscovery of who you really are is. And I thought that was such a, I mean, obviously, if we had a theologian on here, they would probably slice that to pieces, but I just thought from a personal journey, and kind of a, considering like all these interesting things that they're discovering now, or that they're playing with, the different ideas that are out there. I thought it was just such a interesting, I've very rarely been exposed to a theory or a way of thinking that has drawn me like closer to my faith rather than like further away from it. You know, most ideas you're like, oh, I don't know, man, that seems like a left turn for me, right? But I enjoy playing with that.
Yeah.
Thanks, but not for me. But I thought this one was just it was so interesting. It's like so much to explore there. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think it's a kind of a cool take on it, because the clip that you shared with me, he said something kind of like that towards the end. I appreciated that's where he was going with it. I think you know, I think I'm not sure why he thinks he's the observer. Like that, I don't know. Like if we were going to put a particularly Christian spin on it, we could say, yes, there's the observer. The observer is fundamental. Fundamental reality is the observer, consciousness. Right? This space-time, whatever, is created out of his observational power. And then there's this moment when one of the creatures that he makes, he breathes the breath of life into, right? And this is this great gift. Now you're an observer. And that, like, you can now create
God. Yeah.
In the image of God, right? And then now that you can also like take that observational power and imbue it into instruments and do this other thing. And so, like, you know, maybe like to be is to see, or to be seen, right? In a way, to exist is to experience. Yeah.
Truly
So yeah, so I thought it was one of those things where I always get a little frustrated when scientists start talking philosophy. Probably the same way that they get really upset. Well, you know, like whenever I had this experience, so I you know, teach logic, and there's a lot of cool things in logic where you can make these analogies with other things. And so, yeah, I'll make sports analogies, I'll make movie analogies. Well, for a while, I would make like some biological analogies, like, you know, like cell mitosis, you know, all sorts of stuff. And I noticed there's a couple of the pre-med students, you know, the biochem, molecular biology majors, they're sitting in the front, because they always sit in the front, like they're there to get their A, get to medical school. And they would just kind of cringe every time I would say anything biological, you know. So I asked one of them afterwards, like, hey, I was saying something that was making you uncomfortable. It's like, oh no, it's fine. It's just every time you bring up something biological, it's wrong. And I just have to remember that, like,
he doesn't know what he's talking about.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's here to teach me logic, and I don't know anything about logic.
Aside. Let me see if I can get his point without, yeah.
Right. So I'm sure, and so I know for sure, anytime I talk about science, that it's like all the real scientists, even the ones at the undergrad level, are just kind of like, not really, but I'm glad you're trying, you know, like, good for you. Like, you show some enthusiasm.
Right.
So I think I feel the same way a lot of times, the scientists. So it's like, hey, we found the observer, right? And immediately his mind went to, I'm the observer, you know, and what I'm doing is I've forgotten that I'm the observer. And so I need to, like, go back to remember that I'm the observer. And that's who we all are. We're all the observer kind of thing. It's like, why did we go there? Like, that's kind of a big jump. You know, like, that's cool.
One of millions of leaps you could take with this theory, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But, you know, bringing consciousness to the fore and kind of putting it on this pedestal that maybe it had to abandon when neurology was discovered, or really, really pushed into. It's like, there's no soul, there's just neurons, there's just chemicals. And I say, no, actually, soul is more real than the neurons, than your body.
That's right.
It's like, you know, I'm on board with that. Like,
exactly.
Let's go down that road.
That rings very true to me too, you know. And I've always found, like, you know, and I've been fascinated with the writings of, like, you know, like, I mean, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. I mean, you know, these new atheists or whatever. To me, I've loved reading their stuff because it's challenging. It's, you know, it's well reasoned. There's a lot of that, and you're like, and
funny. It's fun to read too.
It's funny, and they rightly point out, you know, so many of the misadventures of, you know, the church and Christians and whatnot through history, you know, and it's easy to write, oh, you know, flawed people make, you know, what's the saying? hurt people.
Yeah.
But to me, it's always kind of like it's kind of like that U2 song, so I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Every time I listen to that, it rings hollow. It's like, dude, like that doesn't ring true for me, that reality is the only reality. In fact, like that it just doesn't fit. Even with very basic understandings of science, like science tells us that all systems decay over time, that order always will decay into disorder, like that there's no sequence of random events that would occur even over billions of years that would create order. Like that's not a thing. It doesn't happen in science, right? And so but yet again, it's like, grant me this one miracle, right? But we're asked to believe that out of complete nothing and chaos over billions of years, all this order. Now I do believe in, not believe in evolution, but you can observe evolution like occurring over time. In some ways, you don't see these giant leaps from one species to another, but whatever. Even if maybe there were, maybe there were.
Okay,
and that's fine. But it's very difficult for me to get my mind around that wasn't some kind of guided process or mathematical process, at least that was. And so where did the mathematics come from? Like that doesn't. It's very so at some point order doesn't. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
I've just always found, and I think we probably agree on this, perhaps wholeheartedly, any theory, and I enjoy looking into theories and just kind of playing around with them and talking with other people about them. I love talking with people that I disagree with, but any theory that starts out of the gate and says there is no soul, I just find it implausible.
The only thing I hear in my head is only a Sith speaks in absolutes.
But it's just yeah, let's see where it goes. Right. Show me your evidence. I'm open to hearing anything, but man, that is such a huge ask. Right off the bat. It's so contrary to almost everyone's experience. I don't even know how we would start with that. Wow, amazing.
Amazing.
No soul. Wow.
Right.
Or biological machines. Cool. Yeah. All right.
It's funny, man. Thinking about your, since Tony was watching us, I was thinking about what you were talking about biology, making a biology analogy in front of a biologist. And
it's embarrassing. Tony, I should know better.
Tony and I were watching. He was my roommate in San Francisco, and we were watching, I think it was Crimson Tide. Tony, you can chime in if you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a submarine movie, right? And Tony was on submarines, so he was, so every time something would happen, he was like, dude, that's not even the way it is. That dial is not next to that dial. It's over next to that dial.
Or you hear the klaxons, dive. We're like, we would never hit that.
That doesn't happen.
What are you talking about? Yeah.
And it was so annoying. It was like, dude, I'm trying to watch a movie. I get it. It's not
Fiction.
Correct. And you're interrupting the whole flow of where I'm at, right? One time we're watching Indiana Jones and the second one, the what was that called? The
Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom. And there's that scene towards the end when he's fighting next to this river of lava, and and then the dude punches into his heart, chest, and rips his heart out, right? But the dude keeps fighting or whatever. And Tony goes, that's ridiculous. That would never happen. There's no way that you could fight that close to a river of lava and not be incinerated.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, but what about the dude that got his heart ripped out of his chest and didn't fall over dead?
That was fine.
That guy kept fighting. That's fine, but the proximity to the lava river is the problem.
It was like in the Star Wars Episode 8, where it begins with a bombing run, and the bombs in space drop through gravity.
Right.
And everyone's super mad about it. Where's the gravity coming from? And it's wait, this is a movie with the space wizards. You're upset about
the ships whiz by. There's the whoosh of air.
Whoosh.
There's no whoosh.
They clearly have aerodynamics in space. You bet.
He just chimed in. He believes in Deadpool now. So all right, all good.
Fair enough.
All good. Tony, I miss you, buddy. We should have him on this podcast. That would be an hour of riotousness.
Sounds awesome. Let's do it.
He says, but he's a smart dude.
Let's set it up.
Yeah. Well, dude, this is a good combo, man. I always love these. So
it was a little rambly, but I think we heard from the candidate.
I do love, I mean, not to segue back into politics, but I do love the way that language, like one word can be just completely dismissive, like the word, weird. Oh, it's weird. Right. And it's like all of a sudden everybody's like talking weird, which did you notice how fast that went away too? Like I haven't heard anybody say that recently. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because everybody's a little weird. Everybody. In fact, if you ask most people to describe themselves, like, just like even on dating apps, right? Like somebody makes their I am a little weird about this, right? Weird. That's a self-description thing. Like I'm a little weird about feet. I don't like them on my body. And it's just a little, or whatever it is, right? I'm just a little weird about this. I think people
add too much salt on their eggs. I'm a little weird about that.
A little weird about that, right? And they use it on themselves so often that I think, because I remember thinking maybe the second day, because they were still like just hammering it, like they thought that was the most brilliant like dismissal ever. Oh, they're just weird. I was like, that's gonna backfire on you, because people are like, I'm a little weird. So maybe I should like pay more attention to those guys. Yeah. And then the other one is rambling, like oh, this interview is just totally rambling, whatever. It's like, yeah, but what about the points that he made? Were the points any good? Because that's what the interview's about, are the points. So anyway. All right, bro. Well, this was a good one. An hour and a half, dude. Look at that. An actual, like this is, you can watch the whole thing in a sitting, not even have to go pee.
Oh yeah, that's right. We didn't have to like pause it for bathroom breaks.
For bio breaks, that's right.
Actually, right, this chair that I'm sitting on. No, I'm just kidding. No.
I was waiting for this. Do I need to get one? All right, guys. Tune in next week, Wednesday. We'll see you next week on the Hamadi Hump Day.
Hamadi Hump Day.